I met Olivia at a charity gala 8 years ago. I was showcasing my architectural designs for a community center project. Scale models under soft lighting, blueprints carefully mounted on easels. She approached with genuine curiosity, asking questions that showed real interest rather than polite conversation. I remember her burgundy dress, how it contrasted with her blonde hair, how her laugh seemed to brighten the overly formal atmosphere. By the end of the night, I'd barely spoken to anyone else. She handed me her business card, event coordinator for the Royal Crest hotel chain, with her personal number scribbled on the back. "In case you ever want to discuss architecture outside of a stuffy fundraiser," she said with a smile that made me feel like we shared a secret in a room full of strangers. Our relationship moved faster than any project I'd ever developed. 3 months of dating, and I was sketching our future home during lunch breaks at my firm. 6 months, and I was showing her Victorian houses in Denver's historic district. She fell in love with a 3-story Queen Anne that had been neglected for years. Peeling paint, rotting porch, but with bones that an architect could appreciate. "Can you see what it could be?" I asked. She squeezed my hand and said, "I see exactly what you see." The wedding was small but elegant. Olivia's specialty, after all. We honeymooned in Barcelona, where I dragged her to every Gaudi masterpiece, and she pretended to be as enthralled as I was. When we returned, I launched into renovating our Victorian while climbing the ranks at my urban planning firm. Every evening and weekend for 3 years, I stripped layers of old paint, restored original woodwork, carefully matched period details while updating the infrastructure. Olivia would bring me sandwiches and cold beers, occasionally helping with the lighter work, more often documenting the transformation for her Instagram. "My husband," she would introduce me at her work functions, "the man who builds dreams with his bare hands." I spent 3 years restoring every inch of that Victorian, hand sanding the original oak floors, carefully matching the period moldings. But nothing I'd ever built felt as perfect as the moment Emma was placed in my arms, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine. When Noah arrived 2 years later, I remember thinking, this is it. This is everything I ever wanted to create. A beautiful family in a beautiful home that I had restored myself. The perfect blueprint come to life. Emma inherited Olivia's blonde hair and outgoing personality. By age 5, she was chattering with strangers in grocery stores and drawing elaborate pictures of houses that I proudly displayed in my office. Just like her daddy, people would say, and I'd beam with pride. Noah was quieter, more observant, with dark hair that Olivia attributed to her grandfather. He loved to sit in my home office and play with my drafting tools. Supervised, of course, already showing an interest in creating things. On weekends, we'd build elaborate block towers together, and I'd teach him about balance and foundation, concepts he couldn't possibly understand but seemed to enjoy hearing about as we played. Olivia's career was flourishing too. She'd been promoted to regional events coordinator, planning everything from corporate conferences to celebrity weddings across the hotel chain's Colorado properties. Her boss, James Whitfield, often praised her efficiency and creativity at company gatherings. "I don't know what I'd do without her," he'd say, raising a glass in her direction while his wife Rebecca smiled politely beside him. I was happy for Olivia's success, even when it meant late nights and occasional weekend work. We were both building our futures, stone by stone. I first noticed something was different about a year after Noah was born. Small things. Olivia started having more evening events that ran late. Her texts became sporadic during these times. "Network coverage is terrible in the mountain ballrooms," she explained. There were sudden business trips to chain properties in Aspen or Vail, sometimes with only a day's notice. When I'd ask about them, she'd grow irritated. "Do you question my work ethic now that we have 2 kids?" she'd snap. I'd back down immediately, not wanting to be that husband, the one who doesn't support his wife's career. Then came what I now think of as the first tremor, that initial crack in the foundation that you might dismiss as settling until the whole structure begins to shift. Emma had a school science project about genetics. Simple stuff. Eye color, hair color, blood types. She brought home a worksheet where we were supposed to fill in our family's traits. Olivia was type A, I'm type O, and according to Emma's pediatric records I accessed for the project, both kids were type A. As an architect, I'm trained to see when measurements don't align. The foundation must match the blueprint, or everything eventually collapses. That night, staring at Emma's school science worksheet, I felt the first real tremor in the foundation of everything I believed about our life together. I pulled out my phone and Googled blood type inheritance patterns. I read and reread the charts, plugging in our combination. Type O and Type A parents can have Type O or Type A children. Both Emma and Noah were Type A. Perfectly possible. I exhaled, feeling silly for the momentary panic, but something still felt wrong. I kept researching, filling the margins of Emma's worksheet with my notes. Then I found it. A child with Type O and Type A parents has a 50% chance of being Type O. What are the odds that both our children would inherit their mother's blood type? Not impossible, but unlikely enough to notice. I remember sitting alone in my home office that night, my daughter's genetic worksheet in my hand, hoping desperately that I was wrong, that there was some explanation that wouldn't destroy the family I loved. But deep down, I already knew. The blueprint of our life together had been fundamentally flawed from the start. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. Olivia's phone was suddenly password protected. She took calls in another room. Twice I woke at 2 a.m. to find her side of the bed empty, only to discover her downstairs, quickly closing her laptop as I entered. "Just finalizing some event details," she'd say, coming back to bed with a kiss that felt rehearsed. When I checked our cell phone records, I found hundreds of text messages to and from one number, James's private line, saved in my phone from company gatherings. I began to catalog all the business trips, comparing them with James's Instagram posts. Too many overlaps to be coincidental. I noticed how Noah's eyes were the exact shade of hazel as James's, how Emma's artistic skill mirrored his wife Rebecca's paintings I'd admired at their house. The puzzle pieces were fitting together, creating a picture I didn't want to see. The confirmation came when Olivia left for a 3-day conference in Vail. After dropping the kids at my mother's house for what I said was a date night, I searched our bedroom. Nothing in her drawers, nothing in her closet. I was about to give up when I remembered her large travel tote in the guest room closet. Inside a zippered pocket wrapped in a scarf, I found an iPad I'd never seen before. It wasn't password protected. Why would it be? She never expected me to find it. The tablet screen illuminated my face in the darkness of our bedroom as I scrolled through years of their messages. "Nathan's so proud of Emma's drawing," Olivia had written to James. "If only he knew she gets her artistic talent from you." James replied, "Let him keep playing, Daddy." Saves me the trouble. I felt physically ill, reading them discuss my children, their children, while I remained the clueless provider, the unwitting caretaker of another man's legacy. There were photos, too, intimate ones, dating back to before our wedding. Messages discussing how they'd laugh about me during their hotel rendezvous. Plans they'd made and canceled about leaving their spouses. Complaints about James not wanting to leave his wife's family money. Calculations of how much easier it was to let me provide for the children while they continued their relationship. And the most devastating confirmation, explicit acknowledgments that James was the biological father of both Emma and Noah. Have you ever felt that gut-wrenching moment when everything you believed was suddenly revealed as a lie? That moment when your world stops spinning and you have to decide, do you collapse under the weight of betrayal, or do you find the strength to fight for what still matters? Hit subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild from broken trust. I didn't confront Olivia immediately. Architects don't tear down without a plan for what comes next. Instead, I documented everything: screenshots, recordings, dates, and times. I consulted a lawyer specializing in family law, explaining my situation with clinical detachment, as though discussing a theoretical case study rather than the implosion of my life. I started moving money into separate accounts, just enough to provide a foundation for whatever came next, not enough to trigger Olivia's suspicions. For 2 agonizing weeks, I lived with her as though nothing had changed. I kissed her goodbye each morning. I bathed the kids and read them bedtime stories. I sat across from her at dinner, watching her check her work messages with the knowledge of what those messages actually contained. I felt like I was living in one of those architectural renderings, a perfect-looking structure with no actual substance inside. When my preparations were complete, I executed my plan with the precision of a well-drafted blueprint. I waited until the children were having a weekend sleepover at my mother's house. Then I called James directly from our home phone, with Olivia sitting across from me in the kitchen. "We need to talk," I said when he answered. about Emma and Noah's paternity. The silence on the other end told me everything. Olivia's face drained of color as she realized what was happening. "I think you should come over," I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. "We have arrangements to discuss." I hung up and placed the phone on the table between us. Olivia started with denials, then switched to tears, then to anger. I responded to each with calculated silence, saving my words for when they would have maximum impact. James arrived 40 minutes later, unshaven and visibly agitated. I invited him to sit at our kitchen table, the one where my children had eaten thousands of meals, where Emma had done her homework, where Noah had first managed to use a spoon on his own. The table I had refinished myself, stripping away layers of old paint to reveal the grain beneath, not unlike what I was doing in this very moment. I laid out the evidence methodically, printouts of their messages, timeline of their affair, the children's blood types compared with genetic probability charts. I presented the DNA test results I had secretly obtained, a simple cheek swab while the kids were sleeping, sent to a private lab, confirming what I already knew. Through it all, I maintained the calm demeanor I use when walking clients through complicated structural issues. Problem, evidence, solution. Finally, I presented them with the legal documents my attorney had prepared. A paternity acknowledgement for James to sign. A custody arrangement giving me primary physical custody. A child support agreement requiring James to contribute financially to the children's upbringing, substantially so, given his considerable salary as regional director. "You can't possibly take the children from me," Olivia whispered, tears streaming down her face. Her hand reached for mine across the kitchen table, the same hand I once thought would never betray me. "I'm not taking them from you," I replied, sliding the custody agreement toward her. "I'm simply designing a new reality that accommodates the truth. You chose your blueprint, Olivia. Now we all have to live in the structure you built." James tried to bluster, threatened to fight me in court, questioned whether I could prove any of this. I slid my phone across the table, showing them I'd been recording our entire conversation. "Your choice," I said. "We can do this privately, with terms that are generous considering the circumstances. Or we can do this publicly, where everyone, including Rebecca and your employer, learns exactly what kind of man you are." This wasn't about revenge. This was about salvaging something worthwhile from the wreckage. My relationship with the children I had raised and loved, regardless of biology. James signed the papers that night. Olivia, realizing her options were limited, signed the next day. Within a month, our divorce was in process. The custody arrangement was formalized, and I had begun the painful process of explaining to Emma, in age-appropriate terms, that sometimes families change, but love remains. I won't pretend the next months were easy. Explaining to my parents that their grandchildren weren't biologically related to them. Watching my mother's face as she processed this information, but then immediately asked when she could next have the children overnight. "They're still my grandchildren," she said firmly. "Biology doesn't change that." Watching Emma try to understand her new reality, with weekend visits to Olivia's small apartment and occasional, quote, special outings with James, who struggled to connect with the daughter he had fathered but never parented, holding Noah during nightmares, wondering if he sensed the seismic shifts in his world, despite being too young to understand them. Rebecca left James within weeks of learning the truth. The hotel chain asked for his resignation after the scandal became impossible to contain. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who had been deceived. James had engaged in multiple inappropriate relationships with staff members over the years. Olivia lost her position as well, her professional reputation as damaged as her personal one. I took no pleasure in their downfall. Collapsed structures leave only rubble, never satisfaction. I threw myself into my work and my children. I finished the backyard landscaping project I had been planning for years, building a play structure for Emma and Noah, planting a vegetable garden they could help tend. The physical labor helped process the anger and betrayal. Moving earth, setting stones, creating something permanent and real became my therapy. It was through this project that I met Sophia. My firm had collaborated with her landscape architecture company on several commercial developments, but we had never worked directly together until she was assigned to consult on a community park I was designing. Her approach to integrating natural elements with built structures resonated with my own design philosophy. During a site visit, she mentioned having recently designed several residential gardens. Exhausted from my amateur landscaping efforts, I half-jokingly asked if she'd consider a small, private project. She came to the house the following weekend to assess the yard. Emma immediately attached herself to Sophia, showing her the fairy garden she'd created in a corner of the property. Noah, typically shy with strangers, brought out his toy trucks to demonstrate how he moved dirt around, just like Daddy. I apologized for their enthusiasm, but Sophia smiled and said children's input was essential for family spaces. They see possibilities adults often miss. Over the next few months, the garden took shape under Sophia's guidance. I found myself looking forward to her visits, to her practical suggestions and creative vision. We worked side by side planting native Colorado species, installing irrigation, building a small pond that delighted the children. Unlike the whirlwind beginning with Olivia, this connection grew slowly, deliberately, like the garden itself. 6 months after the project was completed, I finally worked up the courage to ask her to dinner, a proper date, not a working meal between colleagues. Before she answered, I told her everything. About Olivia and James, about the children's paternity, about the divorce that had finally been finalized. She deserved complete transparency, even if it meant she would walk away. She didn't walk away. Instead, she shared her own story of betrayal by a former fiancé, of rebuilding her life and her trust. Our first date lasted 5 hours, talking in a restaurant, until the staff began stacking chairs around us. Our relationship developed with careful intention, each of us mindful of past wounds, each committed to absolute honesty. That was a year ago now. This morning, Emma asked me if I would help her build a treehouse in the backyard. "You're the best builder in the world, Daddy," she said. As I held her hand, walking through the garden Sophia designed with us, I realized something profound. What makes a father isn't shared DNA or blood type. It's shared moments, shared growth, shared love. The structure of our family changed, but its heart remains. And this time, we're building on truth. There are nights I still wake up and remember the pain of discovery, the cold fury of betrayal. But then I hear Noah's gentle breathing from the baby monitor, or Emma talking in her sleep about dragons and castles, and I know I would endure it all again to be their father. Some blueprints can't be measured in conventional terms. Olivia sees the children every other weekend now. She's trying to rebuild her own life, working at a small local event planning company, dating someone new who knows her history. James pays his support on time but remains an awkward, distant figure in the children's lives. A cautionary tale about how biology alone doesn't make a parent. I've chosen not to fuel the children's relationship with resentment toward either of them. That would only add weight to a structure that needs to remain light and strong. Sophia now spends most weekends at our home. The children adore her, especially Emma, who has found a nurturing female presence who encourages her creativity without the complicated emotions that now color her relationship with her mother. We're discussing having her move in permanently, not rushing but drawing up the plans with care. I'm often asked if I regret not seeing the signs earlier. If I wish I had known from the beginning that Emma and Noah weren't biologically mine. My answer surprises people. I'm grateful for the blindness. Had I known 6 years ago, perhaps I wouldn't have formed the bonds that now make me incapable of seeing these children as anything but my own. Sometimes ignorance builds stronger foundations than truth could have managed at the outset. We can't always choose the materials we're given. Sometimes the structures we planned collapse despite our best efforts. The measure of success isn't avoiding failure. It's what we choose to build from the rubble. My family looks different than I once imagined, but its foundations are stronger for having been tested and deliberately rebuilt. If this story resonated with you, I'd appreciate you sharing it with someone who needs to hear that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. Sometimes it's just the difficult beginning of a more authentic life. Leave a comment about a time when pain eventually led you to something better than you had before. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about love, loss, and rebuilding. Tomorrow, I'm taking Emma to buy supplies for her treehouse. We're going to draft the plans together, measure twice, cut once, all the things my father taught me about building something that lasts. Noah wants to help paint, though at 2 that promises to be more mess than assistance. Sophia is designing a small garden beneath where the treehouse will stand, with Emma's input on which flowers to include. This is not the family structure I originally designed, but sometimes life forces us to adapt our blueprints, to build something different than we planned, but no less beautiful. And unlike that first blueprint, this one is built on authentic materials, honesty, resilience, and love that chose to remain even when biology gave it every reason to walk away. Some might say that makes it stronger than what came before. I'm inclined to agree.